The thunderous crash of waves against the shore woke Julia Owens with a jolt. Her heart hammered in her chest as she blinked away the last wisps of sleep, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling fan spinning lazily above her. Then reality rushed back. This was her new temporary home, the quaint beach house she'd rented for the summer to escape her life and finish her novel. Julia stretched and padded to the window, pushing aside gauzy white curtains that billowed in the salty breeze. The Atlantic Ocean stretched before her, an endless canvas of blue that sparkled under the morning sun. For the first time in months, she felt a genuine smile tugging at her lips. This was exactly what she needed after the publishing house had rejected her manuscript for the third time. 3 months, she whispered to herself. 3 months to rewrite everything and prove them wrong. The beach house was more charming than the online listing had suggested. Weathered gray shingles, a wrap-around porch complete with a hammock, and interiors that were clean and tasteful if a bit dated. The rent had been surprisingly reasonable for such a prime location in Seabrook, a sleepy coastal town that catered to the wealthy summer crowd but retained its fishing village charm. After brewing coffee in the vintage percolator, Julia ventured onto the porch with her laptop. She'd barely settled in when she spotted a figure jogging along the shoreline. Even from a distance, the man's athletic build was impressive: broad shoulders, tanned skin, and dark hair ruffled by the wind. As if sensing her gaze, he slowed, turned, and waved. Julia waved back reflexively, then felt oddly embarrassed by the interaction. She hadn't come here for social connections. She'd come to write and heal from her recent breakup with her editor, who had crushed both her heart and her literary dreams in one cruel conversation. Forcing her attention back to her screen, Julia typed the opening line of her revised novel. "The ocean keeps our secrets but never promises to forgive our sins." She was still contemplating the next sentence when a shadow fell across her keyboard. "You must be the tenant." Julia looked up and almost gasped. The jogger from the beach stood before her, even more striking up close: intense green eyes, chiseled jawline, and a smile that could probably charm anyone within a 5-mile radius. "Yes, I'm Julia Owens." She extended her hand, aware of her rumpled appearance in contrast to his, Xavier Calloway. His handshake was firm, warm. "I'm your landlord. Just wanted to welcome you and make sure everything's satisfactory with the house." Julia blinked. This was not how she had pictured her landlord. The email correspondence had been handled through a rental agency, and she'd imagined some retired couple who spent their summers elsewhere. "The house is perfect, thank you, though I thought I'd be dealing with Coastal Haven Rentals." Xavier ran a hand through his damp hair. "They manage my properties, but I like to personally check in when I'm in town. I live just down the beach." He gestured vaguely to the north, where Julia could see larger, more luxurious homes dotting the coastline. "That's very considerate of you," Julia said, trying not to stare too obviously at the water droplets clinging to his shoulders. "Just being neighborly. Listen, there's a welcome basket inside local favorites, some information about the area. If you need anything, my number's on the fridge." He pointed to a small wooden building beyond the dunes. "That's my workshop. I'm usually there during the day if you have any problems with the house." "Workshop?" Julia was intrigued despite herself. "I design and build custom furniture." His expression shifted, a hint of pride mixing with something that looked almost like vulnerability. "It's a hobby that got out of hand." "I'd love to see it sometime," Julia said, surprised by her own forwardness. Xavier's smile widened. "Anytime. Enjoy your stay, Julia." As he jogged away, Julia's fingers hovered over her keyboard, her protagonist temporarily forgotten as she wondered about the man who had just disrupted her carefully planned summer of solitude. The next morning, Julia decided to explore the town. Seabrook's Main Street was a charming collection of independent shops, cafes, and art galleries. She wandered into a bookstore called Tidal Pages and lost herself among the shelves. "Are you finding everything all right?" The elderly woman at the counter peered at her over cat-eye glasses. "Just browsing," Julia replied with a smile. "I'm staying for the summer." "Oh, where are you staying, dear?" "The Blue Beach house on Pelican Drive." The woman's eyes lit up. "Ah, Xavier's place, lovely property. He did all the woodwork himself, you know, the built-ins, the porch swing." Julia's interest piqued. "You know him well." "Everyone knows Xavier in Seabrook." The woman leaned forward conspiratorially. "He could have lived anywhere with his money, but he chose to come back home after making his fortune in tech. Started that furniture business as therapy after his wife died, though that was years ago." Julia tried not to look too interested. "His wife, cancer, took her very young. He was just getting his company off the ground then. After he sold it, he came back here and keeps to himself mostly." "Such a waste, handsome man like that." The woman winked. Julia thanked her for the information and purchased a local history book, feeling slightly guilty for gossiping about her landlord. As she left the shop, she literally bumped into Xavier himself, nearly dropping her purchase. "We meet again," he said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "Sorry, I was distracted." Julia clutched her book tightly. Xavier glanced at the title and grinned. "Planning to become a local expert? I like to understand the places I write about," she explained, then added, "I'm a novelist." "Or trying to be anyway." Interest flashed in his eyes. "Published? Not yet. That's why I'm here, last chance to make my manuscript work." "Writer's retreat then, I won't disturb you." There was something warm in his voice that made Julia wish he would disturb her just a little. "I could use some local insight, actually. Would you have time for coffee sometime? For research purposes," she added hastily. "Research purposes only." His teasing tone made her blush. "I'm free tomorrow morning. The cafe at the end of Main Street makes the best blueberry scones in New England." Julia nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. 9 o'clock, it's a date. He seemed to catch himself. "I mean a research meeting." As Xavier walked away, Julia stood rooted to the spot, wondering if she'd just made a huge mistake. She was here to rebuild her career, not start a summer fling with her landlord, no matter how intriguing he might be. That night, unable to sleep, Julia wandered onto the porch and was drawn to the beach by the silver path the moon laid across the water. The sand was cool between her toes as she walked toward the shoreline, stopping when the gentle waves lapped at her ankles. "Couldn't sleep either?" Julia startled at Xavier's voice. He stood a few yards away, hands in the pockets of his shorts, looking as if he belonged to this landscape of shadows and moonlight. "I've always been a night owl," she said, trying to sound casual. "The ocean's beautiful at night." "It is." He moved closer, and she could smell cedar and salt on him. "What's your book about?" The question surprised her. Most people asked about her chances of getting published or whether they might know any of her work. "It's about a woman who inherits a lighthouse from a grandmother she never knew existed. She discovers old letters that suggest her grandmother might have been involved in something illegal during Prohibition." "Sounds intriguing. Historical mystery, with elements of romance," Julia admitted. "The love story just happened as I wrote. The characters had other ideas." Xavier nodded as if this made perfect sense. "The best stories often take on lives of their own, like people." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the waves. "Why Seabrook?" he asked finally. "There are more famous writers' retreats," Julia considered her answer. "I needed somewhere real, not pretentious, not a postcard, just authentic, somewhere people actually live, not just visit." His gaze rested on her face, thoughtful. "Most summer people want the postcard." "I'm not most people." She met his eyes, surprised by her boldness. "No," he agreed softly. "You're not." The intensity of his gaze made Julia's breath catch. Suddenly aware of how alone they were under the vast night sky, she took a small step back. "I should try to sleep." "Big writing day tomorrow?" "After our coffee, of course." "Of course," she echoed, already wondering what to wear. "Good night, Julia." "Good night, Xavier." As she walked back to the house, Julia could feel his eyes following her. And for the first time since arriving, she wondered if 3 months in Seabrook might be too long for her heart to remain unaffected. The cafe was bustling when Julia arrived the next morning, but Xavier had secured a table by the window overlooking the harbor. He stood when he saw her, and something about that old-fashioned courtesy made her smile. "I ordered the famous scones," he said as she sat down. "And coffee black for me, but I wasn't sure how you take yours." "Black is fine. Thanks." Their conversation flowed easily as they shared childhood stories and career paths. Xavier explained how he'd developed a security software program in college that eventually became the foundation for a company he later sold for a staggering sum. Hence the luxury of making furniture instead of sitting in board meetings, he concluded. "You miss it. The tech world." Xavier considered this. "I miss the problem-solving and the camaraderie of the early days, but not the pressure or the politics." He leaned forward. "What about you? What pulled you toward writing?" Julia traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I've always lived partly in my imagination." Writing just gave those daydreams somewhere to go. She hesitated, then added, "My parents wanted me to pursue something practical, so I got an accounting degree and wrote in secret until I couldn't stand it anymore. And now I have 6 months of savings left to make this work before I have to go back to spreadsheets." Xavier's expression grew serious. "What would help? With your writing, I mean." The question caught Julia off guard. "Honest feedback, I suppose." "My last relationship was with my editor, and when we broke up, his professional opinion became less than objective." Xavier's eyebrows rose. "That sounds complicated." "It was a mistake from the start," Julia admitted, "mixing business with pleasure." "Yet here you are, having coffee with your landlord," Xavier pointed out, his tone light but his eyes watchful. Julia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "For research," she reminded him, though the excuse felt flimsy even to her own ears. "Right, research." His smile suggested he didn't believe her either. "In that case, how about a tour of the town's historic sites tomorrow for your book?" "I'd like that," Julia said, knowing she was stepping onto dangerous ground but unable to make herself care. Over the next 2 weeks, Xavier became Julia's unofficial guide to Seabrook. They explored hidden coves, hiked coastal trails, and visited the town's small museum. Each excursion was justified as research, but Julia knew they had long since crossed into something more personal. One evening, Xavier invited her to see his workshop. The small, weathered building revealed a surprisingly sophisticated interior, polished concrete floors, walls lined with tools, and several pieces of furniture in various stages of completion. "This is incredible," Julia breathed, running her fingers along the edge of a cherry wood dining table. "You made all these." "It started as therapy after Elise died," Xavier said quietly. "Something to do with my hands when my mind wouldn't stop racing." Julia looked up at him. "The bookstore owner mentioned your wife. I'm sorry." "It was 8 years ago." Xavier picked up a piece of sandpaper, seemingly more for something to hold than any real purpose. "We were college sweethearts. When she got sick, I threw myself into building the company, thinking success would somehow save her more money for treatments, better doctors." His jaw tightened. "By the time I sold the company, she'd been gone 3 years, and you came back here. Where else? This was home. This was where we'd planned to raise children someday." He set the sandpaper down. "What about you? Anyone serious before the editor?" Julia shook her head. "I was always too busy dreaming up fictional relationships to maintain real ones." She attempted a smile. "Pathetic, right?" "Not at all." Xavier moved closer. "Some people are worth waiting for." The air between them seemed to thicken, and Julia found herself wondering what it would be like to kiss him. As if reading her thoughts, Xavier reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I should get back to the house," Julia whispered, reluctant but wary of the intensity building between them. "I promised myself 2,000 words today." Xavier nodded, dropping his hand. "I've kept you long enough. Let me walk you back." That night, Julia couldn't concentrate on her novel. Her protagonist's romance with the mysterious lighthouse keeper seemed pale compared to the electricity she felt whenever Xavier looked at her. She closed her laptop and stepped onto the porch, surprised to find a small package on the outdoor table. Inside was a wooden bookmark, intricately carved with a lighthouse design that mirrored the one in her novel. A note read simply, "For marking your progress." Julia clutched the bookmark to her chest, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It was becoming increasingly difficult to remember that her time in Seabrook was temporary, that at summer's end, she would return to her real life, with or without a book deal. The following weekend, Xavier invited Julia to a benefit gala for the town's historical society. "It's black tie," he warned, "but it's the social event of the summer season. Good research," he added with a teasing smile. Julia hesitated, checking her budget mentally. "I didn't exactly pack formal wear for a writing retreat. There's a boutique in town," Xavier suggested. "Consider it a business expense for your novel." Julia relented and found a simple but elegant midnight blue gown that made her feel like she belonged in a different world than the one she usually inhabited. When Xavier picked her up in a classic Aston Martin, looking devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo, she knew the evening would be memorable. The gala was held at the town's Grand Old Hotel, a Victorian masterpiece overlooking the ocean. As they entered, Julia noticed how people nodded deferentially to Xavier, some openly curious about his companion. "Why are they staring?" she whispered. "Because I rarely attend these things and never with a date," he replied, his hand warm on the small of her back. "Is that what I am? A date?" Julia couldn't help asking. Xavier stopped, turning to face her fully. "What do you want to be, Julia?" Before she could answer, they were approached by an older couple who greeted Xavier effusively. "Xavier, darling, we've missed you at the club this summer," the woman said, eyeing Julia with undisguised interest. "I've been busy, Mrs. Patterson. May I introduce Julia Owens? She's staying in my beach house for the summer. Julia, this is Margaret and George Patterson, the beach house tenant." Mrs. Patterson raised perfectly groomed eyebrows. "How unique! And what brings you to Seabrook, dear?" "I'm a writer," Julia said, suddenly conscious of the social divide between herself and most of the people in the room. "Working on a historical novel set in a coastal town." "How fascinating," Mrs. Patterson replied, clearly uninterested. "Xavier, you must tell us about your new furniture commission for the Baxters. We heard it's quite substantial." As the conversation shifted to people and events Julia knew nothing about, she felt increasingly out of place. She excused herself to get a drink, needing a moment away from the scrutiny. Standing at the bar, Julia overheard two women talking nearby. "That's his tenant," one said incredulously. "I heard she's living in his smallest beach house practically for free." "Classic Xavier charity case," the other replied. "Remember when he hired that local boy with the stutter to work in his workshop, always trying to save someone? Though this one's prettier than usual," the first woman added with a laugh. "Maybe he's finally ready to move on from Elise." Julia's cheeks burned with humiliation. Was that how everyone saw her? A charity case. Was that how Xavier saw her too? Someone to be helped, guided, saved? She set down her untouched champagne and slipped through the French doors onto the terrace, needing air and space to think. The night air cooled her heated face as she gripped the stone balustrade, looking out over the moonlit gardens. "Julia," Xavier's voice came from behind her. "Are you all right?" "Am I a charity case?" she asked without turning around. "What?" His confusion sounded genuine. "The women at the bar, they seem to think I'm your latest project, getting a discounted rent special treatment." She finally faced him. "Is that why the beach house was so affordable? Was it never market rate?" Xavier's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, then to something like anger. "Those women don't know what they're talking about. But they're not entirely wrong, are they? The beach house should rent for twice what I'm paying." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Julia had come to recognize as a sign of frustration. "I own the property outright. I can charge what I want." That's not the point, Xavier. I don't want to be someone's good deed. Is that what you think this is? He gestured between them. All of this, the tours, the coffee, tonight you think I'm just being kind to the struggling writer, Julia swallowed hard. I don't know what to think anymore. Xavier closed the distance between them, his eyes intense in the moonlight. Then let me make it clear. Yes, I lowered the rent because the rental agency told me you were a writer needing quiet space. Yes, I was curious about you from the moment I saw you on that porch. But everything since then, every moment we've spent together has been because I'm falling for you, Julia. Not out of pity or charity or boredom. Julia's heart pounded against her ribs. You hardly know me. I know enough, he said softly. I know you're brave enough to chase your dream when everyone told you to be practical. I know you see the beauty in ordinary things. I know you've made me feel more alive in these past weeks than I have in years. Xavier. Julia's voice faltered as he reached for her hand. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll walk away right now, he challenged. Instead of answering, Julia closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. His arms immediately encircled her, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. Not exactly how I planned our first kiss, he murmured. I'm not complaining. Julia smiled up at him, feeling lighter than she had in months. Should we go back inside? He asked. Julia shook her head. Take me home instead. The drive back was charged with anticipation. Xavier held her hand across the console, occasionally lifting it to press a kiss against her knuckles. When they reached the beach house, he walked her to the door. I want to come in, he said honestly. But I also want to do this right. Julia appreciated his restraint, even as part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind. Define right, proper dates, getting to know each other without rushing, making sure you know this isn't just a summer fling for me. What if I want it to be? Julia challenged, though her heart wasn't in the question. Xavier's expression grew serious. Then I'd respect that, but I'd try my damnedest to change your mind before August ends. Julia reached up to touch his face, marveling at how comfortable this felt despite how new it was. I'll see you tomorrow, count on it. He kissed her again, tender but promising more. As Julia watched him drive away, she wondered how her simple plan for a productive summer had become so wonderfully complicated. The following weeks passed in a sweet blur. Julia found herself writing with renewed energy, often with Xavier nearby him sanding a piece of furniture while she typed, sharing ideas and coffee and increasingly passionate kisses. Her novel transformed as her own romance blossomed, her characters reflecting the joy and uncertainty she experienced in her growing relationship with Xavier. They fell into an easy rhythm of work and leisure. Mornings were for writing and woodworking, afternoons for exploring the town or swimming in the ocean, evenings for cooking together and talking late into the night. They still hadn't crossed the final physical boundary, both seemingly content to let their intimacy build gradually. One evening, as they walked along the beach at sunset, Xavier mentioned a furniture show in Boston the following weekend. I've been invited to exhibit a few pieces, he explained. Would you come with me? We could make a weekend of it, nice hotel, dinner, maybe catch a show. Julia hesitated. A whole weekend away together? Too much. Xavier stopped walking, turning to face her. No, it's just, Julia took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you first, my manuscript. I submitted the revised version to an agent in New York last week. She's interested and wants to meet. Xavier's face lit up. Julia, that's amazing. When? That's the thing. She suggested next weekend. In New York. When Julia nodded, Xavier smiled. Then we'll go to New York instead of Boston. I'll reschedule the furniture show. Julia blinked in surprise. You do that. But it's an important opportunity for you. There will be other shows, he said dismissively. This could be your big break. I can't ask you to sacrifice your work for mine. You didn't ask, I offered. Xavier took her hands in his. Julia, I believe in you and your writing. I want to be there when this agent tells you what I already know, that you're incredibly talented, Tears pricked at Julia's eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if she doesn't like it in person? What if I'm getting my hopes up for nothing? Then we'll deal with that together." Xavier pulled her into his arms, "But I have a good feeling about this." Julia buried her face against his chest, overwhelmed by his support and her own emotions. "I don't deserve you. Funny, I was thinking the same about you." He tilted her face up to his. "There's something else I've been meaning to tell you. I've been offered a major commission custom furniture for a boutique hotel chain. It would mean expanding my workshop, hiring a team." "Xavier, that's wonderful. It also means I'd be traveling more, at least initially." His eyes searched hers. "I was hesitant to commit because of what might happen when your 3 months are up." Julia's heart stuttered. They had been carefully avoiding discussions of the future, living in their summer bubble. "What are you saying?" she asked quietly. "I'm saying I don't want what we have to end with the summer." Xavier's voice was steady but vulnerable. "Whether your book sells or not, whether you need to go back to accounting or not, I want us to find a way forward together." "It's only been 6 weeks," Julia whispered, though her heart was racing with possibility. "I know it's fast, I know it might seem crazy." Xavier stroked her cheek gently. "But I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Julia." The words hung between them in the salty air, sincere and world-changing. Julia realized she'd been falling since that first morning when she'd spotted him jogging on the beach. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "But I'm still trying to figure out my life. What if I need to move back to the city? Then I'll come with you, or we'll figure out a commute. My work is portable. My furniture designs can be created anywhere." His eyes never left hers. "I lost someone I loved once by putting work first. I won't make that mistake again." Julia kissed him then, pouring all her hopes and fears into it. When they broke apart, both breathless, she said, "Let's go to New York together, one step at a time." The New York trip exceeded all expectations. The agent loved Julia's manuscript and offered representation on the spot, with enthusiastic plans to submit to publishers the following month. Xavier charmed the agent over dinner and later celebrated with Julia in their hotel room, where their physical relationship finally reached its natural conclusion in a night of passionate lovemaking that left them both breathless and even more deeply connected. As July turned to August, Julia's novel found a publisher in a modest but promising deal. Xavier's furniture commission was confirmed, and he began plans to expand his workshop. They spent hours discussing possibilities. Julia could write anywhere. Xavier's business was in Seabrook, but required travel. They both loved the beach but appreciated city energy. On Julia's last official night in the beach house, Xavier prepared a special dinner on the porch, with candles and wine and the sound of waves as their soundtrack. "I have something for you," he said as they finished dessert, reaching into his pocket. Julia's heart leapt to her throat, but instead of a ring box, Xavier produced a key. "What's this?" she asked. "The key to my house, the main house, not this one." His eyes held her steadily. "Move in with me, Julia, not as my tenant but as my partner, are you sure? We've only known each other 2 months. Sometimes 2 months is all it takes to know you've found your home." Xavier covered her hand with his. "You can keep the beach house as your writing studio if you want separation between work and home. But I want to go to sleep with you every night and wake up with you every morning." Julia turned the key over in her palm, considering. She had planned to return to her city apartment while working with her new publisher, but the thought of leaving Xavier and Seabrook filled her with sadness. "What about my apartment? My furniture? Keep what matters, sell what doesn't, store anything you're not ready to part with," Xavier suggested. "I have plenty of space, but I'm also willing to find a new place together if you don't want to move into my territory." Julia smiled at his thoughtfulness. "I'd like to see your house first before deciding. You've never invited me there." "Because I was afraid you'd realize how much money I actually have," Xavier admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I didn't want it to change things between us." "Does it have ocean views like this place?" Julia asked. better ones, higher elevation, and room for my books, an entire library waiting to be filled, he promised. Plus an office with the best light in the house. Julia pretended to consider this. And how far is it from this excellent writing studio I've grown attached to? About a 10-minute walk down the beach. Xavier's expression grew hopeful. Is that a yes? Julia leaned across the table to kiss him. It's a definite maybe. Show me this house with the library tomorrow, and I'll give you my final answer. Xavier's house, or rather, his architecturally stunning beachfront home did indeed have an empty library waiting for Julia's books, and a sun-filled office with panoramic ocean views. It also had warmth despite its size, filled with Xavier's handcrafted furniture and art collected from local artists. What do you think? He asked anxiously as they completed the tour. Julia turned to him with a smile that answered before her words did. I think we should start packing my things tomorrow. Xavier's relief was palpable as he pulled her into his arms. I was prepared to beg. That won't be necessary, Julia assured him, though I wouldn't mind seeing it sometime. I'll save it for when I ask you to marry me, Xavier said, then froze as he realized what he'd revealed. Julia's eyes widened. Is that also on the agenda? Not today, he clarified quickly. But someday, if you'll have me. Julia rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Someday sounds perfect. 1 year later, Xavier did ask on the porch of the beach house where they'd first met, which was now Julia's full-time writing studio and occasional guest house for visiting friends and family. Her second novel was nearing completion, inspired by but not identical to their own love story. Xavier's furniture business had expanded successfully, his pieces now sought after by collectors and high-end hotels alike. As they celebrated their engagement with a private dinner on the beach, Julia marveled at how different her life had become from what she'd planned that day she arrived in Seabrook. You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd rented a different house that summer? Xavier asked, his fingers intertwined with hers as they watched the stars emerge. Sometimes, Julia admitted, but I'm starting to believe we would have found each other anyway. How's that? The best stories find their way to the right endings, even when the characters take unexpected detours. Julia smiled up at her fiancé. And ours is definitely one of the best stories I know. Xavier kissed her then, a promise of all the chapters still to come in their life together. And unlike your novels, this one has no final page, just happily ever after, Julia teased. With plenty of plot twists to keep it interesting, Xavier agreed, pulling her closer as the waves crashed against the shore, a constant rhythm beneath the story of their love.